and welcome. You're watching Agenda on NDTV 24/7. I'm Kajari Sen, and on this show, we discuss the merits and both sides of any debate. Today, we're going to be looking at something that the Supreme Court has been giving warnings about several times over the last year. In fact, not once, not twice, but thrice this year, the Supreme Court has answered a petition and they have said it's time for the government to look closely at what they call the cult of the VIP. They're essentially saying that the VIP cult has now become so big, it's expanded so far that the significance of symbols like the red light, the red beacon on cars doesn't remain anymore, and therefore it has to be monitored. Today it came out with a ruling on it. Let's first take a look at what the ruling says and then we'll introduce our guests and get some questions going. What does the ruling say? Let's take a closer look.
The red beacon or the Lal Batti car has the Supreme Court now seeing red. The fact that over the years the Lal Batti car has essentially come to symbolize status and power no longer, says the Supreme Court, which has asked both the states and the centre to dramatically cut down the list of people who are eligible for this privilege.
Describing the red beacon as a relic of pre-independence days, India's apex court says only constitutional authorities can avail of the red beacon, which guarantees the right of way. The Supreme Court said the contemptuous disregard to the prohibition by people in power, holders of public offices, civil servants and even ordinary citizens is again reflective of a Raj mentality and is the antithesis of the concept of a republic. Even saying a large number using red lights for committing crimes. Now the centre and states have 3 months to list those in constitutional posts eligible for a red beacon and a siren. That effectively means thousands across the countries can't use it. Violators will face exemplary fines.
जैसे एक आदमी को लाल बत्ती मिली तो उसके साथ उसकी पत्नी, बच्चे, उनका पीआरओ, लगभग एक आदमी को लाल बत्ती मिलती है तो वो 5 लोगों में बढ़ जाती है। इस वजह से इसका बहुत ज्यादा दुरुपयोग होने लगा था, इस वजह से ये जरूरत आई।
Ironically, the Supreme Court's much welcome cleanup could begin at home. Several of the 8 brand new cars ordered for registrars have red beacons. Even though, while Justice Singhvi, who had passed this order, does not use one, despite being entitled. In 2011, several MPs, including Congress ones, had demanded this perk. It was nixed by the Congress President Sonia Gandhi, who, according to sources, had said that there was no need for MPs to get another status symbol. But that's not stopped others. States like UP have been generous in handing out this privilege. Today, more than 850 persons have Lal Batti cars, ranging from the CM to the Panchayat head.
Well, I am firmly of the view that only the Prime Minister and the President of India should have beacon lights. I don't have a beacon light, although I am entitled to one. I think it's a terrible idea for anybody other than the Prime Minister and the President to have beacon lights, sirens.
Omar Abdullah tweeted, "It's amazing how some people are married to the symbol of power. If the PM doesn't need a red beacon, why should anyone else?" The Supreme Court isn't done with self-styled VIPs yet. Another order is expected on security guards. With Bureau Inputs and Siddharth Pandey, Madhusudan for NDTV.
So the big question right now, of course, is, red beacons are being misused, but is there a space for red beacons? And was Supreme Court the right authority to be making a call on what really comes down to a legislative issue? And the first thing I think we need to come down to is constitutional authority versus higher functionary. The Supreme Court says one can have them, the other can't. And we've got our guests who are going to be debating the issue with us. We've got Rajya Sabha MP Najma Heptullah, who's with us right now. First of all, ma'am, if we can just put it into perspective, the red light, there is a space for the use of the red light, yes or no?
I didn't follow. What did you ask me?
Is there a space for the use of the red light? The red light as a symbol, is there a space for the use of the red light?
I never use red light. I don't have a red light on my car. And you make your identity by your own self, not by the paraphernalia you carry, because not only the red light, I've seen many people with black cat, I don't think they are under any threat. I see a lot of people carrying security around them and security cards. I don't think anybody would like to kill them. So these are all have become a status symbol.
Right, a symbol essentially, and a symbol at that point of power. Najma Heptullah saying that there is a identity creation which can take place without that symbol, those symbols being necessary. We also have with us Shiv Sena's Rahul Narvekar, who's joining us to give his view on this issue. Rahul, if you can tell us, at the moment, if we look at the kind of prevalence of these symbols that Dr. Heptullah was just talking about, do you think that it's being abused?
Well, you know, at the outset, the order of the court, the principle based on which this order has been passed, I think needs to be applauded. It's certainly, the thought behind passing this order is definitely a noble one, and it is in the interest of the society. Unfortunately, in today's day and age in India, we have the society divided between two sections, and that's one being the political class and the other being the non-political class, which shouldn't have been the case. And these added privileges such as red beacons, additional security, etc., are factors which add on to this divide. And more often than not, these privileges or these, I won't call them a privilege, but these facilities extended by the state from the state exchequer are misused more often than being used to its proper, than being put to a proper use. Right. And now, therefore, I think the court has come down very fairly. But then, I don't think it is appropriate for the judiciary to decide who should or who should not get, because this is within the prerogative of the legislature and the executive. At the end of the day, the executive using their wisdom, the legislature using their wisdom will decide who is entitled to, who requires it and who does not. And I think the court is right to call upon the executive to submit a detailed list with reasoning as to why these people should be allowed to use these red beacons or security for that matter.
Let me give a couple of clarifications on what the Supreme Court said, and we'll go over to Dr. Heptullah, who clearly wants to respond to this. The Supreme Court has said that there will be punitive measures taken if the state governments and the central government does not take action on this ruling. They've said they've given advisories, but this is a ruling they must abide. Dr. Heptullah, do you think that is the space of the judiciary?
You see, I agree with the other person on the line from Shiv Sena, what he's saying, that let it be left to the administration to decide and the legislator to decide what status should get, red light, blue light, green light, whatever light. I think the Supreme Court has a tremendous responsibility to look after the cases, the disputes of the people. Thousands and lakhs of cases are pending in various courts in the country, and I think Supreme Court should not bother about these small petty issues which can be taken care by other authorities like legislature and the administration. Right. Supreme Court is the job which Supreme Court can do. We cannot do it. So I think they should concentrate more on their more difficult job, more important job, than to bother who carries the red light, who carries the green light.
Fair point there. There's a larger role for the Supreme Court. In fact, without further ado, let's take questions over to our audience who's with us, who can put the questions they want. What's your take on what the Supreme Court has done today?
I think it's perfectly true, and it's right on their part to take part in this, because people are more of misusing this thing of beacon light, and I think the use of that should be limited to the constitutional authorities. Right.
I think a fair point is being made there. Let's quickly go over to Rahul Narvekar and take that question over to him. Rahul, you know, we just heard someone say that essentially what it comes down to is the legislature isn't doing it on their own. We've come to the point where the Supreme Court gave the warnings and the legislature did not act. What else is left but for the legal system?
See, from what I have known or the information that I have on this subject, there is a code of procedure for using these beacons, and the RTO also has been, you know, the respective RTOs of different states have also been given the details of these as to who is allowed to, who is not allowed to, what is the kind of light that has been that is to be used. But unfortunately, the enforcement of these rules is something which everyone is giving a go by to. So the problem is not with the procedures in place. There are procedures in place, but the implementation is not being done. And that is why we are seeing this kind of a chaos in the society, number one. And number two, if at all there is a regulation, and if the Supreme Court thinks that that particular regulation or rules are arbitrary or they are not in accordance with equality or any such principle of fundamental, if it's violating any right of every citizen, then I think the Supreme Court can suo moto or on the petition of any citizen act upon it. But when there are rules in place,
which is what they have done, Rahul, which is what they have done. They have acted on the petition of a citizen. Dr. Heptullah, do you think that that is going beyond the space that the Supreme Court should in fact be working in?
Well, I would not say that, because Supreme Court can do whatever they like. They are our the highest authority, judicial authority. But in my opinion, in my humble opinion, I feel the Supreme Court has got lot more important job to do than to bother about the responsibility which should be implemented by the government or the legislature. The decision should be left. And if they don't do it, then Supreme Court can say that you do take your responsibility. Well, I as a deputy chairman had a light and I had a siren. I never ever used that siren because I thought it makes me more unpopular than popular.